We're going to call the meeting to order. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to everyone. For the record, I'm going to guess that Mrs. Federico is maybe just running a few minutes late because I know she'll be here. Mr. Riccitelli will be splitting duties between the Board of Aldermen, Board of Ordinance meeting and our meeting, so he'll be in and out. Dr. Feasers, do you have student staff recognition?
We do. So good evening, everyone. Good evening to the board. A Happy New Year as well. And we missed a snowstorm during school, so we're really glad about that. Some may not agree with me, but I'm thrilled. So we have some students and staff that we would like to recognize this evening, and I want to begin with one student who is not able to be here this evening but still publicly recognize him, and that is Brett Huber, who's a student at Foreign High School. Brett broke the long-standing state record, which was set in 1970, so long time ago, for the number of receptions in a single season in football. So that's incredible, 1970 to today, lots and lots of years. Not only was Brett, does he now hold the new state record, he also went on to break the state record for career receptions. I believe Brett's a junior, isn't he? Senior, okay, so career, so that's why it says career. His other accomplishments for this season include being named to the All-Southern Connecticut Conference team, and he also earned first-team All-State honors. His certificate has been sent over to Foreign, it will be presented to him at this Friday night's athletic dinner, and he will also be recognized for all of his achievements as a young man. I'm really sorry that he couldn't be here this evening, but we really wanted to recognize him because that's pretty remarkable that, over 40 years, 47 years at this point, that he broke the record after all these years. So we want to congratulate him and make sure that we give him the certificate that he's owed. The next group of students that I'd like to recommend, we have five girls, on the 2016 Foreign High School girls swim team, and they are state champions, and we are really thrilled to be honoring them. So I'm going to call the five of them up, and I know Coach Skochis is here as well. I can see her way over in the corner. You want to just wave, Kristen, so people know, or stand up so people know who you are? Okay. Mr. Brennan is here. There he is, okay, assistant principal at Foreign, to recognize the girls as well. So we have, if you would come up, Sarah Fitzgerald, who's the team captain, and she is a senior. Emma Longley, who is a junior. Ava Corsi, also a junior. Emily Sportini, a junior. And finally, Jordan McDonald, who's a 9th grader. So they're actually added again because some of these students did really, really well last year. Last year we had the honor of recognizing the Foreign Girls Swim Team for winning the Class S 200 Freestyle Relay Championship event. This year they're here before us to be recognized for earning 4 state championships this season. Recognize 2 returning champion swimmers from last year. Sarah, you have to raise your hand here. Sarah, okay, sorry. And Sarah's also the captain, and also Ava Corsi. So let me highlight what they've done this year and all these girls have achieved. Actually, they moved up to Class M this year, which actually meant it was a more competitive, is that right? Because it's larger schools that you competed against this year? Am I right in that? I know that the SEC changed and our standing, so to speak. So Sarah, right here, is the Class M state champion for the 100-yard breaststroke, the Class M state champion for the 200-yard medley relay team. She also achieved All-State Honors, Southern Connecticut Conference champion 100-yard breaststroke, the All-Southern Connecticut Conference team, and the New Haven Register All-Area team. Congratulations. Emma, who is a junior, is the Class M state diving champion. She also has achieved All-State Honors, the Southern Connecticut Conference champion in diving, the All-Southern Connecticut Conference team, the Southern Connecticut Conference record holder for 6 different dives, and also she made the New Haven Register All-Area team, so congratulations. Ava Jr. Is the Class M state champion in the 200-yard medley relay team. And she also achieved All-State Honors. So we want to congratulate Ava as a junior. Looking forward to what you're going to do next year as a senior. Emily Sportini, also a junior, is the Class M state champion also for the 200-yard medley relay team. You know, a relay, it's a team. And she achieved also All-State Honors. So congratulations to you, Emily. That's fabulous. And Jordan McDonald, our last student who's here, who's actually a freshman at Foreign, Class M state champion in the 100-yard butterfly, Class M state champion in the 200-yard medley relay team, joining her classmates here. She also achieved as a freshman All-State Honors and the New Haven Register All-Area team. Congratulations to you. So truly very remarkable and commendable accomplishments. While Sarah will be graduating this year and she will be sorely missed, Foreign is very fortunate to have Ava and Emma, Emily and Jordan returning. Again, we want to thank Kristen Scutchus, who's the lead coach over at Foreign, and Megan Condon, who also works side by side with you. I don't know, is Megan here tonight, Kristen?
No, she's not.
Wasn't able to be here. Actually really helping these young women achieve what they've achieved. I also would like to share with you that Coach Scutchus was named the 2016 Southern Connecticut Conference Division II Coach of the Year. And while this is an incredible honor for you, we're not surprised at all. You need to know that, Kristen. We know the remarkable job that you do in terms of teaching and working with the girls on the team. It's tremendous. So we want to congratulate all of you. And so what I'm going to do is present each one of you a certificate. And Kristen, I have a certificate for you also, if you would come up. And what I'd like to ask you to do then is, would you like to go and, because I know the board members would really like to meet you face to face. Okay? Let me start here. There. Sure.
Congratulations.
Terrific job.
Congratulations.
Terrific.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Great.
Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you, thanks.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Thanks.
Wonderful.
Thank you, thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And the third recognition that we would like to give tonight is to Law High School. And I know Fran Thompson is here this evening, principal, right here. And this is because Law has been named a Unified Champion Banner School. In actuality, Law has been recognized nationally because of its unified sports team. So what I'd like to do is to call up 3 of our student representatives and then also the teacher who is the champion for the Unified Sports Team, Pat Daniels. So will Hunter Kane come up?
He's not here.
Oh, he's not here.
He's not here.
Oh, sorry, okay. But we'll recognize him
Yes.
anyways. Slade, is Slade here?
Slade is here.
Slade, come on up. Slade, come on up with me, okay? Come over here, okay? How are you? You stand by me. Okay, right here.
I like this.
And Atul Joseph, is he here? So let me tell you about these young men in this team. This is a national award sponsored by Special Olympics International. And this is the very first year this award has been issued in Connecticut. Jonathan Law is one of 31 Connecticut high schools so honored. Special Olympics Unified Champion schools must have teams that participate in at least 2 sports per season. They have to demonstrate inclusive teams, and also they have to make sure that they're teaching kids leadership skills, and they have to demonstrate whole school engagement and ensure the sustainability of these components and these programs year after year. And Law has really led the district in this. The Unified Sports is a year-round athletic program at Law which partners student athletes, those with and without intellectual disabilities, in athletic competitions with other Connecticut high schools that offer unified sports. Coach Pat Daniels, you need to come up, Pat, has led this program for many, many, many years at Law, and we have seen her take this program to reach recognition to the state level and now to the national level. These accomplishments speak so highly of Coach Daniels, her assistant coaches, and her unbelievable team of athletes. They're truly amazing and an inspiration to us all. Jonathan Law was already recognized on earning this national award on Friday, December 9th at the Unified Leadership Summit held at the Aetna Insurance Company in Hartford. So we want to congratulate Coach Daniel, these 2 student representatives that are with us, and then all of the students that are part of the Unified Sports Team. That's fabulous. So. Congratulate you. And then I'm going to ask you, will you go around and shake everybody's hand here at the table? This way. I'll give you this. I'm going to give you this. Okay?
Congratulations.
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 Thank you very much. Extra, really.
I'm sorry. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great job.
Congratulations.
Excellent job. It's terrific.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much, Dr. Fieser. Congratulations to everybody. We now have student reports. I believe Lauren goes first today.
Julia couldn't make it today because she's at a basketball game. So in the news today, Ms. Condon's English 1 classes worked with shoes to understand stereotypes before reading To Kill a Mockingbird. They developed fictional characters that would wear the shoes their group picked to then understand how we stereotype people and what we can do to put an end to judging books by their covers. The Foreign High School String Orchestra, under the direction of Stephen Uhas, performed at the 27th Annual Trees of Hope at the Maritime Center in New Haven, Connecticut. The National Honor Society students coordinated our annual giving tree to benefit families of Milford Family Resource Center. Foreign students and staff donated over 30 gifts to children who might not otherwise receive them. The value in gifts donated exceeded $1,000. In addition, National Honor Society students raised over $150 to benefit the Milford Food Pantry by selling carols to staff and students to send to their favorite teachers and friends. The carols were delivered in great holiday spirit by NHS students on Friday, December 23rd. Spanish classes taught by Mrs. Convertino, Mrs. Morzini, and Mrs. Shepard participated in an interdisciplinary lesson with Foreign's talented and knowledgeable art teacher, Mr. Henry Tchaikovsky. Students learned about the famous Spanish surrealist painter, Salvador Dali. Immediately following the presentation, Spanish students became surrealist artists. They created pictures using many of the familiar surrealist images such as burning giraffes, elephants, butterflies, skulls, and tigers. Students enjoyed the collaborative lesson and the time to work with their friends from other classes. Mr. Tchaikovsky's expertise and generosity gave students and teachers the opportunity to extend their learning to a deeper level through immersion and hands-on work. As for guidance, over 75% of the senior classes applied to at least one college. Scholarships are listed on the scholarship section of our website. All 10th graders completed the Do What You Are Career Interest Inventory during the month of December, and the 9th graders are working with counselors this month to complete the Career Cluster Finder Career Interest Inventory. Students use the result of these surveys to research careers and plan elective courses for the upcoming year. As for athletics, tonight, Lance DiNatale, Brett Huber, Steve Lynch, and Angelo Simonelli are attending the SEC All-League Football Banquet in New Haven. They are being honored for their accomplishments this past fall. Our winter sports are in full swing, and our teams are off to good starts. Our girls basketball team recently hosted the Milford Holiday Festival during our vacation week. Foreign, Law, Ranford, and Immaculate High School all participated. Our boys basketball team is currently 4-2 under our first-year head coach Ian Kirkpatrick. They will be home Wednesday night at 7 p.m. against West Haven High School. And our wrestling team is off to a wonderful start. Their home opener will be on Wednesday, January 18th at 6:30 p.m. at Warren High School. The boys swim team is home tomorrow against North Haven. Several of our swimmers have qualified for states already. The gymnastics team opened their season this past Saturday, and they are competing tonight against Hampton High School. And our boys and girls indoor track teams will be attending the McCreevy Invitational at Wesleyan University this Friday. Several members of our indoor track team have qualified for the postseason. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan Law?
Good evening. In law academic news, midterms are coming up next week, and teachers and students are both preparing to take exams. The DC inauguration trip is the 18th through the 22nd. Students are taking midterms before the trip. On day 1, students will meet the tour director and go to dinner. Day 2, students will be seeing various monuments, including the White House, visit the Supreme Court, head to Mount Vernon, and take an evening ghost tour. On day 3, students will be witnessing the oath of office, the presidential inaugural address, and the inaugural parade. On day 4, students will be visiting a Smithsonian museum of their choice, and then go to the National Archives. On day 5, students will be visiting the Arlington Cemetery and then head home. It will be a fun and educational trip for the 60 students attending. The Model UN class is participating in the Yale Model United Nations Conference on January 19th to the 22nd. The Ancient World History class will be visiting the Yale Art Gallery on Wednesday, January 11th. The Law Support Center has had 974 students drop in, a 37% increase from this time last year. Students who come in see an average increase of 20 to 25 points on assignments. For some students, their actual semester grades have risen up in an entire letter grade, for an example, a D becoming a C.
In athletics news, winter sports are started with boys and girls basketball, gymnastics, wrestling, ice hockey, and boys swimming and indoor track. Indoor track has already had 26 athletes qualify for the state meets. Senior Melanie Coleman set the school record for the balance beam at a recent gymnastics meet. And tonight, Justin Abe, Jake Mola, and Mitchell Smith will be honored at the SEC All-League Football Banquet in New Haven.
In guidance news, seniors are being regularly notified of scholarships through email. College acceptance letters are coming in. Some recent acceptances are from Emerson, Northeastern, Loyola Maryland, American University, Fordham, Pace, Marist, George Washington University, and Tulane. At this point, over 65% of seniors have applied to at least one four-year college. Law will hold a junior parent-student night this month to begin the post-high school planning process. School counselors are working with ninth graders this month on self-esteem and transition. School counselors will be visiting middle schools in the beginning of February to discuss the transition to high school and course selection. Course selection for all students will take place in the beginning of February.
And finally, in Law Amazing News, in December, the Law Choir, Orchestra, and Band held their annual winter concert with wonderful performances. The choir and some members of the drama club joined foreign for a trip to New York City to see the Broadway show Waitress. The United Way fundraiser raised over $3,053, meaning that Principal Thompson did in fact have to shave his head. The National Honor Society held the annual Giving Tree and collected many gifts for family in need. Key Club raised over $4,000 for the Salvation Army from Thanksgiving to the winter break. Choir, band, and orchestra visited the middle schools and performed songs to encourage middle schoolers to join the music program in high school. Drama Club will be starting to prepare for the spring musical Bye Bye Birdie, as tomorrow they're holding auditions. Senior clothing orders will be in soon, and members of the choir are preparing for their regionals this coming Saturday, a statewide concert. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I know some of you are here for the first agenda item, but if there's others that you're free to, this is, we typically give you an opportunity to head out if you're so inclined. You can wait for you to do so, or otherwise we'll just. All right, we'll move on with the chair's report. Again, Happy New Year to everybody. Board, I just wanted to remind you that we start the budget process tonight with Dr. Fieser's presentation to us, followed by a budget workshop scheduled for this Wednesday and Thursday, as well as next Wednesday, the 18th, and if needed, Thursday, the 19th. Tonight, I'm going to ask the board members to allow Dr. Fieser to make her presentation. And if you have questions, aside from those already submitted in writing, or if you have any comments, please hold them until the end. Board of Finance public hearing has officially been posted and will be held Thursday, February 2nd at 7 p.m. And that's at City Hall. And then administration and myself will be presenting the budget to the Board of Finance on the 15th, Wednesday the 15th at 6:30 p.m. That's upstairs in, I think, conference room D. And just a reminder to the board that we will utilize our committee of the whole date on the 23rd this month for an executive session for Dr. Fieser's mid-year check-in. So at our leadership meeting, we reviewed the meeting planner for the second half of the school year. And I wanted to let you know that the annual report on crisis management and security update has been added to the February business meeting. And the committee of the whole meetings from March and April have been reversed from what I originally had informed you of. We'll have a review of the DMC Special Education Opportunities Review in March at the March committee of the whole meeting, and a workshop on the social emotional curriculum in April. And added to the April committee of the whole meeting will be the annual report on parent involvement, which is prescribed by policy 1110 that we adopted in September. So I'll call for liaison reports. Any liaison reports? Dr. Gregory?
I just have the date. The Invention Convention will be March 11th. Any parents who are interested in having their children participate, if they are participating through their classes, can go to the Milford Education Foundation website for more information.
Good. Any other liaison reports? Okay, I attended the PTA Council meeting in December. I very briefly presented them with the budget workshop dates and the draft of the academic calendar for 2017-18 that we'll be voting on tonight. The only question regarding the calendar was the PD day that was moved from February, where it is this year, to March, and I explained that it normally is held later in the year, but had been moved to February this year because of the understanding of the testing window, and that March is where staff thinks it's most beneficial. They also had a workshop with the health department regarding safe handling of food at their events. That I think there was a representative from every school was there, which was good. So I'll now turn the meeting over to Dr. Fieser for the instructional highlight.
With all due respect, did you want to do public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Thank you. I missed that totally. So anybody who would wishes to address the board this evening for public comment? No? Okay, seeing none, I'll dispense with the notice. Thank you for reminding me.
You're welcome. So we have our instructional highlight, which is going to involve the academy this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Burt so that he can introduce what is going to occur this evening.
Thank you very much. Recently, the Academy Director Principal, Ms. Cianti, sent out a video of some students drumming, and it was such an incredible video, mesmerizing. I think it was 8 minutes long. Watched the whole thing, couldn't stop watching, it was incredible. And I just replied back saying, wow, what a great video. And then through our email exchange, it just turned out this would be an excellent opportunity, not only just to have the students perform, but also it turns out that there's another student who would like to explain her experience at the Academy, what an incredible program it is. So we decided to turn this into the instructional highlight for the month, and to enable us to get an understanding. I think it's going to be good education for the board to get some insight into what some of the things that are happening at the Academy. So less of me and more of the folks from the academy. And over to Ms. Young.
Well, thank you for allowing us the time. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Cianti, and I'm the principal at the academy. For many years, I had worked in the building, took the interim position last year, and most recently took the permanent position. At this point, I can truly say that this is where I am meant to be. My heart is with the academy. I've worked in many different positions, from trading stock in New York to working at a nonprofit where we did free eye exams for children. Each of them provided me with the technical and interpersonal skills that have led me to the academy and really has made it the right career choice for me. Robert Frost said in his poem, "The Road Not Taken," "Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." My career track to the academy was not a direct one, but as Frost said, it has made all the difference. It has, I consider myself fortunate and humbled by the ability to partake in our students' educational process. Their roads towards academic success have not been straight. In most instances, they have had to exert a level of will that is beyond their age. Some days are harder, none are ever stagnant. I commend them for that. I commend the Milford Public Schools for providing a haven of support and exemplary standards that remind each of us that it doesn't matter how or where we start in this road of life, but that we choose to actively seek progress. So our school is not only supported by the Milford Public Schools, but also by agencies like Milford Youth and Family Services and Bridges, to name a few, all working together to guide and empower our students. Our smaller setting affords us the opportunity and privilege of knowing our students and families on a whole personal level. At the academy, we're in the beginning phases of implementing project-based learning. Project-based learning, for those of you who aren't aware, is intended to help students transfer complex problem-solving skills from the classroom to real-world experiences. Students learn in a way that develops deeper learning competencies required for success in college, career, and civic life. They learn to cross the bridge from students to active participants in the classroom. Project-based learning has enabled students to not only become invested in their education, but actively seek new methods to answer questions beyond the curriculum. The process begins with a deeper thought-provoking challenge. Students are not just asked to answer a question, but to use their critical problem-solving skills to resolve a query quantifiably. In our marine science class, our students were introduced to aquaponics. The students were challenged to research the aquatic systems that allows farmed fish in one of our tanks to supply nutrients needed to cultivate plants hydroponically. This could have easily been a chapter in a textbook, but not with project-based learning and not at the academy. Students researched aquaponics and came back to the classroom with individually drawn blueprints to design our own aquaponics system. Our students presented their designs to their classmates. Through thought-provoking inquiry and complex questioning, they were able to collectively design a system that chose the best parts from each individual design. They then decided on the materials they would need, and they are actually in the process right now of building the framework for it. So project-based learning and our staff has allowed them to transform information from words and books into tactile educational experiences. We're teaching them how to ask questions and seek solutions beyond what is given to them. We see it in each day in the inquiries that our students make and the new ways that they approach their day academically. I am now proud to introduce a student who exemplifies this in ways abound. I would like to introduce Megan Gleason, an exemplary student at the Academy. And then following Megan, we'll have our world drumming performance.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan Gleason. I'm a senior at the Academy and a former student of Jonathan Law. I've recently applied to 4 colleges and I plan to pursue a degree in social work. I'm here today to speak to you about my experience at the Academy and how it has definitely changed me for the better. In all honesty, my high school experience for the last 3 years was not the easiest by any means. I suffered from depression and anxiety, as many students do, and being in such a large school like Jonathan Law, while it has so much to offer, wasn't the place for me. Since I've come to the academy, I've learned where my place is. The academy just has so much to offer. There's not enough time in the world for me to explain how much everyone, the staff, the environment has helped me so much. I am able to get out of bed in the morning and be happy to go to school. And that is something I can never say I was happy to do. So I got to experience building the aquaponics system. It was amazing, and it taught me a lot, and it created questions in my mind that I was able to ask and learn so much about just the system and everything else about marine, which is a great class. All of my teachers are so supportive, and having the smaller classes and having a more personal experience with your teachers, it's just so huge for someone like me. My biggest goal is to erase the negative stigma attached to the academy. When I was at law, I was having such a hard time, and my mom came to me and said, I think you need to go to the academy. And my first reaction was like, me? You're joking. Me? And I was nervous. I was so nervous. It's a whole new environment. And when I got there, everyone else had the same reaction, all the students. You're here? What? And the longer that I've been there, the more I've realized everyone's just like me. I want people similar to myself to be able to realize that going to the academy is it's not a bad thing, and it's not a punishment, and it's something amazing and something that can change your life. And I like to think of the academy as a small school with a big heart, and it's really changed my life for the better, and I hope it can do the same for others. So thank you.
Thank you.
And now
Would you like to introduce your students as well as a little bit about the program?
Certainly. I'm Teresa Voss. I spend most of my day at Foreign, and then I go to the academy in the afternoon and spend time with these fine students. This is Eric, Brandy, Jessica, Pat, and Aaliyah. And some of them have been with me from the start, since August. We started not as an ensemble, but as individuals. And I think you'll be able to hear in their playing that we are no longer just individuals. The first two pieces that we'll play for you, we learned from a book. We had to learn technique of the instruments, how to work together, how to listen to each other, and all the give and take that goes in creating an ensemble. So the first two are very basic musically, but they were teaching tools for us. And then the students will introduce the third and fourth piece that we'll play, but I want you to know that those were created entirely by the students. They came up with each of the different parts, and then the construction of the composition as well. So here we go.
this is the third one we made. We named it We because it sounded like the we. So yeah.
Yes,
Did you have a number of
certainly.
staff?
Yeah, we have a number of staff here. Yep.
Great to
And
see all of you.
several parents as well, too.
And it's also
Yep.
fabulous to see so many of your students that are here this evening. Really, really terrific.
Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you.
I feel hopeful. And I really so, am so blessed by the Academy. Nothing. Need more. Make a clear way to the oh, yeah.
Did you have enough, Mr. Burke? Just one extra. Did you have enough? Does everybody have one here?
It's a little hard following the drumming act. Hopefully, you're enthused about our students, and that actually was introduced for the first time this year. Actually, music for the first time is occurring at the Academy, which is really fabulous. And so is art and physical education, which always there was a form of it, but it's formal physical education. So that's a good thing. So I want to thank you for having the opportunity this evening to present to you the proposed 2017-18 budget. I'd like to begin with just reflecting upon a statement by John F. Kennedy: changes the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. Our progress as a nation can be no swifter than our progress in education. The human mind is our fundamental resource. And the piece at the top of the ripple effect of water was taken as a photo by one of our seniors. And I don't know if it's advanced placement, I'm not sure what the course is, but anyways, just it's his photograph that we borrowed for this presentation. But the idea of the quote speaking about the future and the centrality of education in building the future of this nation, I just thought was so appropriate as we move forward. And as all of you know, but the public may not know, this past spring, the board adopted a new set of priorities and goals. And that document is part of the executive summary that all of you have, and that will be posted, if not already posted, up on the website. What we wanted to focus on to begin this presentation is on the board's learning priority, which really stipulates that all students who have access to it engage in rigorous learning in every classroom. And the thing that was so exciting, I felt as superintendent, was that the board really took time to then define what does that mean with respect to the skills that we would want kids to have when they leave high school, the concept of thinking critically and reasoning, communicating in multiple contexts, problem solving, collaborating, receiving and giving feedback, and there's even more detailed descriptors that go along with these. And again, this is something that we want for all graduates. Okay. For us, when we begin to create the budget, there's always a set of underlying beliefs that we really follow and think about before making decisions, and these beliefs are listed here. Obviously, education is our primary responsibility, serving the whole child, so academics are absolutely critical, but it's not the only piece with respect to our kids as they move through the system. The learning of teachers, ongoing learning by teachers and by administrators is critical. Clearly, safe schools and supportive climates, and also that we recognize that there's differences between and among the schools individually. This budget seeks to sustain the work that has been going on and the progress that we've made. And it also seeks to continuously improve. We want to improve our student learning, deepen it, and make it even richer for students, and also to improve their performance. Continually, we work to improve the climates in our schools. We also work to strengthen our facilities, improve them, our infrastructure, particularly around technology, and of course, the safety and security of our buildings is essential. Improvement is critical in our minds. When I was a young administrator, I remember going to a workshop with Larry Lazat, who, if anybody knows anything about education, was really one of the forerunners in what was called the Effective Schools movement. And I remember him saying there's no such thing as status quo, you're either improving or declining. And to this day, I've never forgotten that statement. And so clearly, this budget, what we wanted to do is to enable us to continue to improve. Just not aiming correctly. There we go. So we want to sustain, we want to continuously improve, but we also want to contain costs. So the bottom line is we are really proud of the fact that we came in with a budget this year that's a 0.791% increase. It's lower than in the last 15 years that the budgets are being presented, and we are really pleased that we're able to come in. This graph just gives you an idea going back the last 12 years to 11 years, 2006-07, and what the superintendent proposed budgets were, and you can see again that what we're coming in at is the lowest in that span of time. I thought I would share with you, this was another student photograph, and his words, so this is Nick Glorioso, senior also at Jonathan Law High School, and if you can read the left, the stability from the dock represents our well-rounded education. The open sea represents the vast opportunities ahead of us, and the island ahead represents our future success and goals. We didn't ask him to write this. He wrote it. It was shared, quite frankly, with me on Friday because it's going into the program of studies. And I said to Shannon Carlson, who's doing the program of studies, oh my gosh, I want to use that in my budget presentation, and got permission to do that. So we're thrilled. But I think it's more powerful simply because it's a student who created this. So let's move into the specifics. These are our priority requests. Otherwise, meaning these are the things that we really want to give attention to. Obviously, there's other requests, and you will see them are increases, but these are the pieces that are the most important for us as we move forward. One is we want to make some changes in the computer science career pathway, which you know began this year as our first career pathway. In the middle school, we are offering robotics. The kits are really aged. They're old, there's pieces that are broken, etc. And so we really want to replace the kits. This would be in all 3 middle schools at a cost of $7,800 per school, and the total cost of $23,400. The next focus is really the up-and-coming career pathway, entrepreneurship and business management. And the starting point for implementing that is the business labs at each of the high schools. So if you were to walk into the business labs right now, they are the business labs that were in place when kids learned typewriting. They are in rows, and if and the only thing that's different is the typewriters have been replaced by computers, but that's the quote business lab. And that's the way it's been for years and years and years. So what we would like to do is to create a more flexible lab that would mirror what you might see in a business, where you have furniture that is adaptable and can enable people to maybe work in groups. And also, we would have laptops for kids to work off of, but they would be mobile laptops, so they're wireless, so that they could be taken over again and work with groups, et cetera. And then what we would also like for in each of those classrooms, so this would be one in each building, is what's called a large format printer. It's a printer that would enable students to, if they were engaged in marketing, to be able to print off a larger banner or a schematic of some kind, et cetera. So these are the costs for this. This is both labs combined. These are the costs that we're asking for support. Other student learning pieces. The language lab at Harborside Middle School, if you remember, 3 years ago, West Shore received a new language lab. This year, it was put into East Shore, and next year is the last one, which would go into Harborside Middle. And just to refresh your memory, these language labs mirror the labs that are at the high school that are used in language, and they are also the kinds of programs that are on them, and the capabilities of the labs are similar to when kids take AP exams, for example, in language. It's in line with what is needed on the part of students. We are also asking for Chromebooks in grade 7 for all students. I believe it's 168 Chromebooks. This is across grade 7. So the new science standards just approved. There are no textbooks with the new science standards. Some book companies may try to convince you that they exist, but the standards were just improved, so there aren't any. So what we would like to do is to move toward having students use as their primary learning tool the Chromebook, which would enable them to really go to open source resources out on the internet. I don't want to suggest that there won't be a curriculum, because there is a curriculum, but we're talking about the instructional materials, the kinds of readings that they would do, et cetera, would be coming via the internet, or different programs that might be able to be downloaded off the internet that students would engage in. And so again, for all 3 schools, the cost of those Chromebooks would be $35,000. And with that, they would need storage carts, one for each building. So the total again is $8,400 for all 3 schools for a storage cart. We would also like to equalize substitute pay. So this year, our substitute situation has almost arrived at a crisis point. And the reason for that is there is a different pay for substitutes at the high school than there is at the elementary and middle. High school substitutes are paid $90 a day, which is pretty comparable with surrounding towns, although there's some outliers, but it's a pretty decent rate of pay. The elementary and middle school substitutes get paid $75 a day. And what is happening is we are, almost daily, there are buildings that are not covered with subs, which means that at the elementary, we have to divide the students up and they go into other classrooms. And the same thing happens in the middle school as well. So what we'd like to do is to equalize the pay, which is to take the elementary and middle school and move it up to 90, so that all of the pay is $90, regardless of what level you serve. And we are able to do that and knowing the increased cost of the budget. Last year, as you know, Mr. Burt really made a concerted effort to start to reduce the amount of times that teachers would be pulled out for professional learning or for curriculum development. A lot of work went on over the summertime, et cetera. Well, the same thing is happening this year. And we're actually, if you go back a few years, we are actually spending less monies on substitutes, particularly with respect to the professional learning pieces than we have. And And next year, we plan to do the same thing, and the idea is to take that money to cover the costs of the substitutes, the increase in the pay. And it is genuinely needed, very, very much so. You know, but the public may not know, that Bridgeport received permission from the State Department of Education to begin to charge tuition for its magnet schools. We have students attending 2 of the Bridgeport magnet schools, Fairchild Wheeler, as well as the Discovery Magnet. We have been informed by Bridgeport that approximately 55 students, it could be more, but 55 students they're expecting, which is based upon the 2015 enrollment in the magnet schools, we would be charged for, which is at $3,000 per student. So that's where the $165,000 figure came about. And that's, in case you want to know, is non-negotiable. If we do not pay magnet school tuition, it will be taken out of the ECS monies. That's in the law. So just in case anyone is wondering about that. And then the last piece is a one-time only cost for the NEASC accreditation at Foreign High School. We had it in this year's budget for law. Law's accreditation is to occur in the springtime, and Foreign's will occur next fall. And again, that's the cost of hotels, food for the team that comes in, and they are with us 3 nights, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday into Wednesday, but it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday is the 3 nights of hotels, and then feeding folks for those 3 days, and then any other kinds of supports, copying, etc. So those are all of the student learning requests. We also have 2 requests under what we call security and climate. The first is a new position. This is the only new position in the budget. It is a .5 residency/truancy officer. Let me talk about the residency piece first. We are increasingly aware of students living or attending in Milford Public Schools, not residing in Milford. More and more, I can tell you that already 10 cases have been actively pursued this year, and there is another 10 waiting to be pursued. And when we have a residency situation, we have to do, if we're going to move to disenroll a student, we have to have the evidence, because as you well know, a family can request a hearing, and then we have to demonstrate proof for why this student should no longer be attending our schools. We currently, or in the last several years, have been using a private investigator. And that works, but it's not necessarily the same person, and it's not a dedicated time that's being given to this. It's by a particular case that, you bring someone in and they then start to do the investigation. So, what a person who's in the position will be able to do is to literally engage in conversations with administrators, receive information from secretaries, because truthfully, we learn about this via the schools, because they either hear about it from kids themselves or, there are other sources of information, et cetera. And so this person, because this person would be in our district, they would be able, we believe, to be able to accomplish so much more with respect to this. Some of you may ask, what might be the savings? Well, you're talking about per pupil expenditure, and someone might say, well, if one student leaves, it's not as if the budget is going to be reduced by the per pupil expenditure. That's correct. But what people may not realize is, in certain situations, you could have, in a grade level, 2 students move in at the elementary level, for example, and those 2 additional students will tip it, and so we will end up hiring a teacher, for example. So that's one thing. But the other piece is if you have a student who's receiving special services, and so those costs, we're incurring those costs. I can tell you that, between last year and this year already, we've saved over $200,000 potentially if those students would have stayed in our district. in terms of what we would have been paying, services particularly. So that's the piece on the residency side. The truancy is really to have someone who would give particular attention to truants. You're aware of the fact that, that we received a grant this year tied to kindergarten enrollment, which that's around a kindergarten attendance. Why? Because it's so critical. All kinds of research shows, obviously, the more you're present in school, the better the chance for success. Truancy is a major issue, and the state has, there's new laws tied to truancy. There's more records and data that we have to keep and submit to the state. The definition of chronic truant redefined, and it's now 10% of the school year, which is any student who is 18 days or more absent is considered a chronic truant unless it's, for example, somebody has surgery, et cetera. And so the schools are trying to do as much as they can, whether it be the social workers or the counselors, et cetera, and notifying families, but it is just not easy. And so what our thought was is that this person could also, not obviously every single truant, but the students that are of the most concern with the idea of getting these kids back into school so that we don't lose them. That's really what that piece is about. So that's $25,000 for that position, which we think very quickly it will pay for itself. And then we are having here the school resource officer, and I know, there are people have asked, because last fall you asked if we would speak with the mayor. We did speak with the mayor. Jim Ricciatelli and I had a formal meeting with him. We did not know whether or not he was going to include it in his budget, but he did not tell us not to include it. He said, if you want to include it in your budget, go ahead and include it. So we did. And I don't know if it's in his budget because we haven't seen his budget. But this would allow, again, a third SRO at the middle school level. Right now there are 2 at the middle school level, and then each high school has an SRO. So here's a summary of the learning requests and the costs there, and what you can see is it's $368,861. But I also would have you take note that if the NEASC accreditation foreign, that's a one-time cost, and if the tuition were not there, then the actual learning request would be significantly less than we're talking about $190,000 less than that 368 that's being requested. This is the security and climate, again, which is $65,000. And so the total here of the student learning and security and climate is $433,861. So that's the sum total, again, of what we're requesting. 38% of that is tied to magnet school tuition. Just so you know, because that's a big chunk, $165,000. So let's move to savings. So we are able to offset all of the costs of what we asked for and actually have additional savings, and that's through reallocations or reductions of funds in the existing budget. So we'll take you through that at this point. Let's begin with the staff reductions, and let me just say straight out, the primary driver that is enabling these staff reductions is declining enrollment. The enrollment is expected to decline nearly 200 students for September of next year. And that's coming off of the New England School Development Council's annual report on our enrollment, and they've been doing it here. I'll bet they've been doing it 25, 30, 40, 50 years, so they have the history, et cetera. So you have 10 regular ed teachers positions that will be reduced at a cost of $600,000, and 4.4 special education teaching positions at a cost of $264,000. And then we have 3 paraprofessional positions that are going to be reduced at a cost of $60,000, or I should say a savings. These are all savings. So almost $1 million, $924,000 is to be saved through staffing positions. I just want to restate upfront, there's no decisions have been made where those teaching positions actually will occur. We know a number of them will be at the elementary level, but the specifics as to which grade level, which building, et cetera, the numbers change continually. The figures that you have of enrollments in your budget book are from October 1. And, you know, classes, sizes have changed, et cetera, movement in and out. So we would not make those decisions until clearly late spring. We also are asking, we found some savings in educational supplies and utilities. Huge amount in educational supplies, $432,000, almost $33,000. The biggest piece of the educational supplies has to do with a reduced amount in textbooks. We've spent a lot of money on textbooks, and moving forward this year, you know, we are not going to be spending as much money at all on textbooks. And plus, as you see in terms of the science, we've moved to no textbooks, and instead we'll move to technology for students. So that's the biggest piece. The other piece, besides the textbooks, is just that we basically squeezed the schools with respect to per pupil expenditure. You know, we feel we're going to be okay. We worked with the principals. We asked them to reduce their budget a percentage, and they did. And that's really how we were able to come up with that reduction. We also have a reduction in electricity of $31,224, and natural gas $11,125. And if you have questions on those, I have to wait till Mr. Riccicelli returns, because I'm not able to answer, because I know in our assumption, we made the assumption that amount was going up, but he'll be able to explain. I think it has to do with the bid and when it occurs, et cetera. So just a summary of the savings. It's almost $1.5 million that we found in the existing budget to offset part of the costs that we, or I should say all of the costs that we requested, but also you know, to be able to reduce the total budget. If we looked at the savings and then the requests, you can see right there, it's the net is over $1 million. What's happening here? I thought I had good aim. There it goes. Okay, that's good. This is, you know, the pie chart that we put in every year, which shows by category. I think you have copies of it in front of you so that you can see the percents here. Clearly, salaries is the biggest amount at 71, almost 0.3%. You know, followed by your transportation, 5.27% of the budget, tuition, 5.3%, or 0.3%. And then you know, you see the rest, instructional supplies and equipment, et cetera. So that's just one way to view the budget. A second way to view it is to look at it just with respect to, okay, take a look at each of these 9 categories. What was the adopted amount for 16-17? What's the proposed? What's the difference? And you can see the percent change in each of these overall 9 categories. So the budget before you, again, we believe will help to improve and deepen and advance our students' learning. We believe we will contribute to safe schools in the two, in particularly the pieces that we're introducing. I should say, and I forgot to say, there's a small amount in the budget if we are able to hire the residency office of surveillance equipment. It's a small amount, but you know, so there's a piece there in terms of if we want to talk about contributing to climates and, safer schools, et cetera. And then lastly, we do believe that this budget honors and recognizes the constraints that are imposed on the city, just and a burden on the part of taxpayers. So I leave you with this quote, which is from Confucius. And I know that, it leads to the notion of peace, but what I like the most about this is that confidence breeds hope, and hope breeds peace. So you're talking about the power of education here, and we certainly believe in this. So with that, I thank you, and we'll answer any questions that folks may have.
Questions for Dr. Feaser tonight?
I do have one question.
Yes, Dr. Gregory?
With the staff reductions, and I'm sorry I failed to email this one, would this mainly be through attrition, or would this be non-renewing current people?
It's a really good question. We are pretty confident that attrition will take care of it. That has been our history for the last 5 years. When I came into the district, Simon Lake had just been closed. So there were a number of teachers that were on the recall list because they had been laid off. A year later, no one was left on the recall list. So, and then each year since then, I think we literally over the last 4+ years have had a 0.2. And that's simply because of attrition. Retirements, spouses being transferred, people taking different positions. So that's our hope. Yes, Mrs. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question on the new science standards and the Chromebooks. The Chromebooks are only needed for grade 7, but which grades are getting the new science standards?
So all grades are getting the new science. We'll begin, curriculum has to be written, but I know that grade 7 was a focal point. Do you want to speak to that?
So we're rolling out the adoption of the standards. This year, we did purchase Chromebooks for grade 6, along with writing the new curriculum. So next year, grade 7 will have a new curriculum, and the hope is that we would adopt the Chromebooks for grade 7 as well. Usually, when you do a curriculum renewal, you also look at a textbook renewal. And the feeling is, as Dr. Feaser explained, there really are no textbooks out there that apply, and this is going to be a richer learning resource for our students.
Okay, so what happens to this year's 7th graders that will be next year's 8th graders? Will they miss out on this curriculum? I don't know if I'm asking that correctly.
They are still living in the current standards, so they will take a grade 8 CMT aligned to the current Connecticut standards, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
The state adopted the new standards, but with a timeline out of 3 years for the assessment. So you have to change your curriculum in line with the students and where they would be. Our current 6th graders will take a new NGSS aligned assessment when they're in grade 8. And so next year they will be 7th graders. So we rolled the curriculum changes along with the students so that they're on track to be prepared for it.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a question similar that you might be able to touch on. So in terms of the Chromebooks, is this kind of bringing us in the direction of a one-to-one, or is there a sharing? It's just for science?
So this would be, it wouldn't be a one-to-one that each student had a book that went with them for the whole day. What it would ensure is that when a student, the teacher has a cart so that every student can always have access to a Chromebook when they're in that classroom.
Okay. And would we expect to see that need rolled out over time for every grade? I know we might already have, I know we have a lot of Chromebooks already, but is that something that going forward
Well, right now we have split teams at the middle schools for 7th and 8th, so it's, we would want to, hoping to do that for 8th grade as well, but it's not going to be as much, it's half the amount, because we don't have as many classes right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So to speak to that, we're looking at this for all departments at this time as an option. We know this is something that explored in previous districts, and a lot of times the technology had not caught up to the content or the discipline. I believe we're finally moving in that direction with Chromebooks. being so relatively cheap compared to even desktops or laptops, and relatively speaking to textbooks as well. It also is reflecting some of our different emphasis in the way in which we're instructing. As you know, through our district goals, we want students that do in-depth problem solving. In many cases, the textbooks we end up with, Connecticut doesn't have a lot of leeway with this. We typically end up with textbooks from other larger states or consortiums. Perhaps don't offer that same opportunity for in-depth thinking. This now gets to, as you heard Ms. Cianti say, talk about project-based learning, inquiry-based learning. We now, instead of textbook-driven, we really want to do standards-based driven, content-based driven, and really use available resources to think about instruction assessment differently. So this enables that. It's not to say, I have seen models where you can get a class set of books as well as a class set of Chromebooks. It does equalize the amount, essentially to a full set of every student one-to-one textbook, but allows for that flexibility of still having some solid resources as well as the technology. So there's a lot of different things we're exploring at this time.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions at this time? I know there were a lot of questions were submitted in writing, and we'll be going over those during the budget workshops.
We'll have as many as possible answered. And we really appreciate the fact that you forwarded those to us. It gave us, it made us that much sharper in our thinking. It helped me in terms of some of the things that I might have emphasized, et cetera, tonight in the presentation, and we really look forward to working with you in the workshops.
If there are no other questions on this, we can move forward.
The next item on the agenda is the academic calendar. And this is for a second reading. I don't know that I necessarily have to go through this again, but you do know that this is part of the regional calendar for this area.
You should all have on your workstation a copy that has the days off more clearly. Mrs. Krasinski.
I just have one thing that, although I know it when I looked at it the first time, when I looked at the professional learning days with the box around it, those days, the students don't have school, right? The professional learning days, the PL days?
Full days?
The full days?
Yeah.
That's correct.
But when I look at it and I see the box, because on the key, every place there's a box, it's early dismissal. So it makes me, when I first look at it, I was thinking, oh, those couple of days, the two in the middle of the year, those are early dismissals. And then I was like, wait, they're professional learning, so the kids don't have school. So I was just wondering if maybe under the PL where it says professional learning for staff, we could put no school for students or something.
We certainly could do that.
Would it be more clear to not have the box around it?
Maybe,
Just
I
have
don't-
the PL, because that was your same
Is that
issue
the
with
same?
the.
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry, I looked at last year's calendar. My suggestion I would offer would be the shading on the PL to match the shading on the holiday and vacation days.
So
Yeah,
still have
something.
PL, but have it shaded with no box?
Yeah.
So it's consistent? Does that make sense, Dr.
That's
Caesar?
absolutely fine, but we can put no students.
I think that.
No school for students on there as well.
We don't want to confuse the staff, however, by.
Well, it has PL, so they know that.
They don't show
I mean,
up.
and truthfully, the first two, the only one that people might get confused on would be the March one, but, the November.
And the November too. There's one in November
Well,
as
the
well.
November now is the election day,
Oh.
and so that's dictate.
If you remember it.
Well, yeah, okay.
Well, but it's
But that's dictation.
And
But
then you're gonna
it's a
put-
good point. So we'll take the box out, we'll shade it, and then put a note down below that simply says,
No school for
no
students.
school for students. You have that, Mrs. Griffin?
I do.
Terrific.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Thank you for those suggestions. Any other, Mr. Jagosinski?
Yeah, I'm, as you know, concerned about the number of half-days. Now, we're going to have potentially professional development, not professional development, parents' conferences in the spring at different grade levels on different days. That's what we're talking about. One of the problems I have with the half-days is the problems it causes for parents who don't have a parent at home and have to find some way to take care of the kids when there's a half a day. If we're going to do that, then in the spring, we're going to create if parents have students at different levels, they're now going to have to be concerned about 2 additional days. So, you know, I would hope that we keep that in mind. And, you know, there ought to be a substantial reason for having them on different days if we're causing the parents those, you know, that inconvenience.
Well, if we were to change it, I mean, one of the things that I would want to do is certainly run it by the parent advisory, which is the presidents of all the PTA council. And, you know, we're mindful of that, but what we're also mindful of, and I hear it from parents a lot, is that when they are on the same day, they have to split. And so a parent can only go to my elementary child, but I can't go to the middle school child, so I send my husband. Or if I don't have my, you know, a partner, then somebody just, nobody's going on behalf of my other child.
The problem with the parents on the Parents Council is typically they're parents who have the time. And the parents who have the most problems are, you know, unable because they're working 2 jobs, you know, 2 parents are working, you know, they have tight schedules. They're not the ones who are going to be on the Parents Council. And I think we need to be aware of, you know, the impact that we're having on these people.
Point well taken, absolutely.
Any other questions or concerns? Are seeing none? Do you have a motion, Mr. Bias?
Yeah, I make a motion that the Board of Education approves the 2017-2018 academic calendar as just amended with the shaded things on it. PL.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
So may I wanted to have you go ahead on terms of the calendar itself, but just speak to one other piece that's not necessarily related directly to the calendar, but we would like to put it on the calendar. And it's tied to delayed openings. So for 2000, and Mrs. Glennon, if this should be a separate item, I can bring it at the next one. But we were just, the notion of the early, not early dismissals, but delayed openings, which obviously affects, you know, school closings if there's too much snow, et cetera, or we delay the opening of school, is that next year we would like to move to a 2-hour delayed opening, which almost every district in our region and in Fairfield County has moved to. We're one of the last holdouts with 90 minutes. The extra half hour would help immensely. I know that's not a decision on necessarily the board, but what we'd like to do is to put it on the calendar.
I think put it on the calendar for next year.
Correct.
So
Well, yes.
I think we could either have a motion to add it to the agenda for discussion tonight, or you can put it on the next business meeting. I think, you know, we need to, it's a conversation, so I think it should be on the agenda.
Why don't we move it to the next month if we want to do that?
And that will give, we'll give parents notice too.
Sure.
If parents want to come and speak to that.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great. So the next item on the agenda are policies. And we have the 2 policies that we brought forward in December, which was the policy on transportation and the changes, the clarification of language, particularly around special education transportation, and then also on homeless students. And those changes were dictated by changes in the law. If anyone has any questions on those?
So these are for a second reading. Are there any further questions on these, on this policy, the changes that were requested? Seeing none, do you have a motion, Mr. Bias?
I have a motion that the.
I'm sorry, what?
That was on the homeless one, right?
No, the transportation.
No, transportation, oh, okay.
Yeah, number 4, agenda item 4A, policy P 3541.
I have a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves the transportation policy 3541 with the recommended changes.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Can you note that Ms. Krasinski left the room?
Oh, sure.
And then, agenda item 4B on the homeless students. Any further questions or comments for Dr. Feaser on that one?
I only have the one on AR 5118-1.
You have a question or you don't have?
I have a question on it.
Okay.
We're on page 1 of 6.
Yep.
Where it says trailer parks are included as homeless. There's a lot of people that live in trailer parks, they're not considered homeless.
So I think that we can get a clarification, but I think it means that there sometimes are trailer parks where that's the only place that people can live and they have no other place, or sometimes there could be, it's like if we have kids also living in hotels, certain hotels, they are considered homeless.
Well, yeah, we list the hotels, motels, campgrounds and stuff, but we have, like, in Milford, we have trailer parks where people live.
They actually
and
own the
they're actual
trailers.
homes.
Right.
If we add that into, I mean, that would classify people that shouldn't be classified as homeless.
So, can you speak to that at all?
I can get further information. My sense is that they're talking about transient trailer parks where it's not, but I can see where there could
We
be
can see,
confusion.
because then,
Sure.
now it opens up a whole big
Sure,
can of worms, like,
sure.
okay, if we live in a trailer park, we can get all this extra stuff for under there, and it shouldn't be, because we have trailer parks that people live in, and they're very nice, and they're actual permanent home.
Right. And we also wouldn't want to have people be classified in a way simply because of.
Yeah, we're offending people. Well, I live in a home, you're calling me homeless now. It's a catch-22 on that, because
Sure.
we do have a couple of those in Milford.
Right, so we can get a clarification from that. Again, almost every bit of this language is dictated by law, but we can check on that. It's a good question.
Mr. Riskiman?
Just to point out on trailer parks, you can rent trailers in trailer parks. And individuals can be placed in trailers through some agencies who pay the rent, and these people are homeless who happen to be living in a trailer park. So that
Well,
kind
that's
of,
that's.
but the general, I mean, it's just that the individual situation is sometimes difficult to discern with precision, so some clarification is
Whether
appropriate.
we can put in non-permanent trailer parks or something.
Well, I'm just saying, you have an ordinary trailer park, and it has a spot, and they're renting out the trailer. They own the trailer, they're renting out, and a person placed there happens to be homeless. They're temporary, they're transient, but they happen to be in the trailer park. And so you can't say they're not homeless in that context if you exclude, well, we pushed them to the trailer park, therefore they're not homeless. Well, it's depends, It's just, there's complications, it's difficult, right? Yeah, that's it.
Well,
I'm sure you pursue it, right.
So we don't normally vote on regulations unless we're required to do so by a statute, so we could still, I think, approve the policy itself, and have Dr. Feaser qualify the trailer park language. Dr. Gregory.
Hi. I just noticed the first line says it's the federal definition, so I'm not sure, with all due respect to everybody's situation, if we're using the federal definition and the federal definition happens to include language, then I would be more comfortable staying with the definitional language, knowing that it might be an ill fit in some cases.
Yeah, now just looking at that is just,
Yeah.
because I know a lot of people, we live in there. That's a permanent home.
Yeah, I mean, but we do then have trailers that, you hook up in the back of your car, you might park it someplace.
But that's what we covered under the campground part.
Correct, yeah.
If I may interject, this is
Yes.
actually language from the legislation from the Kenny-Vento Act. So there's an intent, I would refer you to the second part of that phrase, of letter B, due to a lack of alternative adequate accommodations. At some point, I think we may make a determination, someone's been in a hotel for 3 years, it becomes more of a permanent situation rather than a lack of an alternative setting. That's why we have a homeless liaison who becomes an expert in these, and they make those decisions on an ongoing basis. This is merely just to give some guidelines, because you have to think back to the nature and the intent of the Homeless Act was to, in many cases, not necessarily in Milford, but in some districts, children that were homeless were treated differently. And the default is to treat them with respect and to treat them with kindness and to welcome them in, and essentially, there's no paperwork or there's no vaccinations, et cetera. We have to default to, yes, come into schools, and then we'll find out a way to accommodate your needs. So in essence, all these definitions basically say you can't discriminate against someone because of their certain condition. It doesn't automatically define that you're homeless because you're in this condition. It is essentially a safeguard for those folks. So I think about it differently. Instead of saying, this is defining homelessness, this is protecting those who are homeless, if that helps.
Okay, so are we good with that explanation? Okay. All right, any other questions or concerns? If we're all set then, Mr. Bias, a motion.
Okay, make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves a homeless student policy 5118.1.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
The next set of policies, there's 5 policies here that are part of the 5,000 series, which is in students. And you can see that on these 5, there's some, well, at least 4 of them, there's some sort of, there could be overlapping between and among them. So we have the suspension and expulsion policy. What I can tell you is that that policy is almost verbatim dictated by law in terms of all the definitions that are here, the whole policy and procedure, even the definition, even the list of what is expellable and not expellable. The board certainly has the option to add to the list. If you wanted to add to it, you certainly could, but we would not want to take away from the list because this is boilerplate language here. The new pieces, a new piece which is again coming from the law. On the one hand, the board is, the law now states, I'm trying to remember where it is here in the policy, that pre-K through grade 3 children cannot be expelled. Page 2, second paragraph. Preschool to grade 2, excuse me. Inclusive, if you look at the first full paragraph there, may be given an out-of-school suspension, it's determined by the administration, et cetera. So they can be suspended, they're not to be expelled, however. The exception being, and that's also in the policy here, the exception is, for example, if a pre-K child were to bring into school a deadly weapon, that child can be expelled. I mean, it's a little disconcerting to have that kind of language in the policy, but that's under the law now. And there's also been some changes, around the ages of kids that we are obligated to provide an education for, and in essence, it's really up through age 18. We, if students are expelled, we would provide an education to them. So, but this is, this is pretty much boilerplate language from the law around suspension. So that's that policy. Video surveillance, I had Jeff Nielsen.
Dr. Beazer, can we go one at a time?
Oh, sure, yes, sir, absolutely, sorry.
Mr. Hagedorn?
I had one, I think there should be a better definition. If you go to page 7 of the P5114, where it says weapon facsimile. Now, if you Google it and look at other schools without a definition, there was a kindergartner suspended because this is a facsimile under that regulation. If you want to pass it around a little. It's a bubble gun, and but people have been suspended for that, and I don't think a child should be put through that because we're lacking a definition of facts. You know what I mean? There isn't no actual nothing in here that states that. I mean, if you look at the picture, you'd be like, really? But that actually happened because of that wording in there.
So if you go to the very first part of that, if you go all the way up to one on page 5, under suspension and expulsion, the student may be suspended or expelled. All expulsions go through my office, and I work with the administration, and we make a determination whether or not to move to an expulsion. Where there are certain things that they're mandatory, but we do have, if this were brought to my attention, we would have a different conversation.
But what about the next person when you leave? What we're making regulations for, there's no definition. That's what I'm saying is because of that, people put that in there, and you're putting a small child through an emotional thing that I don't think the child should have to go through.
Mr. Jakuzinski?
Yeah, I agree, because this isn't a one-off. You hear about this periodically, in the papers. Some child took a piece of bread and shaped it like a gun and, was expelled from school. And, and again, I'm not concerned about you or Dr. Thieser, but, this is for, ever. I would suggest maybe that we say a weapon or a realistic facsimile.
That I agree with on that. That would make more sense on that wording.
So might I suggest that we would confer with the attorneys on this? And the reason for that is, again, the policy is really intended to protect the board and to protect students. And so while I really understand what you're saying, I also know that when we define a realistic, like what is a realistic facsimile, so if it's across the room and a student has
I agree with
a weapon that looks like a gun.
I agree, but that bubble gun, that picture, that was the exact thing that happened. That's why I brought that up, because that should never happen. But because of the rules that was put in this wording, that's exactly what happened. And you can't say it didn't happen because it did.
And I'm not questioning you at all on that. And I do know that there are cases across the country where you kind of shake your head saying, really?
Exactly.
With respect to how, there's no two ways about it. I'd like to believe, and I think I'm correct in saying that's really the exception, that when it comes to, weapons in schools,
Zero tolerance,
well, they're just very, very conscious of it, and, the facsimile is, sadly to say, there's more and more toys that are being created that they look exactly like, whatever, a
They're
block or whatever.
realistic, and I agree with you 100%, because an officer, and people are put in those positions, and I agree with that. But I don't agree with that bubble.
Sure, I absolutely hear you.
I think, again, we have to have some faith in the administration that we're going to, same thing with a judge or a police officer, or that you're going to make that interpretation. And of course, an exceptional case like this will make the media because it doesn't make sense. Even if you have a facsimile, it's a third grade student who brought a facsimile, a replica, and it's in their backpack. That's going to be different than a middle or high school student bringing one and brandishing it in a threatening manner.
Oh, without question.
So it's contextual, there's a lot of things that go into the decision-making process. Essentially, as Dr. Fieser said, this is from the legislation.
Oh, yeah.
These are
And
things
I
that are
only bring it
provided
up
to us.
because it has happened. That's the only reason because it's, I agree with you guys and I trust your judgment, you guys do a great job. But for future people, once it says this, period, and there's no cut or dry, there's no variance on that. That's the only reason of having some sort of definition on that.
Well, let me pursue it with the attorneys and then come back to you, because this is for a first reading anyways, so we certainly have time to do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Whiskeyman?
Just in response, you mentioned zero tolerance, and I happen to be a believer that we shouldn't have zero tolerance type of policies, that judgment and discernment go into making decisions, and that when you craft your policies in such a manner that there's no leeway for any thinking about what to do, the context, as you mentioned, in which certain events happen, that we have to be cognizant of the fact that the context makes a huge difference. A 5-year-old boy who brings in a 2-inch penknife to school is not necessarily a threat, but it is a weapon, right? So yeah, I think we need to be willing to give the administration the latitude to exercise prudent judgment in specific cases so that we don't end up with silly decisions based solely upon some zero tolerance approach to everything. That we have to have some degree of confidence in the administration that they will exercise prudent judgment, and that means giving them the latitude to make decisions in context. The difficulty is writing policies which express that in a manner that's acceptable to everyone. So I hope that we can pursue this and come back with appropriate language that expresses, some board members may have a different, opinion in terms of that, but I'm hopeful that we can be persuaded to provide the tools to the administration to exercise prudent judgment in cases where it's appropriate.
And just to remind the board of the process, we bring the case, if you will, before a hearing officer, and the burden of proof is on the district to prove that there is an expellable offense. So it wouldn't just be, here's a picture of a bubble gun. You would have to prove that this was violated policy. So
suspension.
Right, and luckily, the hearing officers I've worked with are all very common sense folks, and they would most likely laugh at me if I brought that, so.
Well, and the other thing is, I don't know how old the child was, but I think you said it was, did you say it was a kindergartner?
It was 5 years old, he was 5 years old. Yeah.
Okay, and under this policy, that child could not be suspended?
Expelled, but he could be suspended.
Well, it basically says that we're not supposed to suspend kids from pre-K to 2. They said, they can be given an out-of-school suspension, that such suspension is appropriate based on evidence that the student's conduct on school grounds is of violent or sexual nature that endangers persons. So it's very, very specific.
Yep.
So under the
I'm there,
circumstances.
but even if a 4th grader brought a bubble gun in, how many parents have let their children go to school and they threw something in at the last second that the parent didn't see.
Right.
Sort of like a bubble gun.
Right, and that happens over and over and over again, because kids are not thinking of the implications of what they're doing.
Exactly.
You know, and that is the issue with respect to zero tolerance would mean those kids,
That's why, I know,
That's
why
not how we
some
operate.
definition there, if it's possible. I don't want to see a child or the parents go through that problem needlessly, you know?
So, Mr. Burt, while you bring up the issue of a hearing officer, the problem that I had with the policy was inconsistencies that I see with our board policy versus this policy, our governance policies, in terms of the fact that we do delegate suspensions and expulsions to the superintendent and to a hearing officer. So, for instance, on page 9 of 20, number 3, I don't believe the board would not be the one modifying a period of mandatory expulsion on a case-by-case basis. It would be either our designee or the superintendent.
correct, well, this would be, the way we operate now is that it would be, it's the superintendent who
Right,
would do that.
so I think that should be corrected to the superintendent may modify the period of the mandatory expulsion, not the board. And then going to the procedure part of it, on letter H, beginning on page 11 of 20, as I went through on page 11, page 13, I just wonder if we could review that again because, number 1 on H1 says that the board or hearing officer appointed to preside. That's our practice. Going down to number 2, upon receipt of a recommendation for expulsion from the superintendent, the board shall, after giving written notice, I question if that should be the board. Number 3, again, we're not the ones that are holding the hearing, but even if we were, our quorum, we have a different rule for quorum in our policy.
Right, and we can do that. I actually asked Carolyn Dugas, our attorney, I actually had her review this, and that's one of the questions that I asked specifically was the question you just raised, and she said, Betty, as long as it's in the first paragraph, the assumption is it could apply in the second and the third. Now, we can make it explicit, that's absolutely fine, but I did ask her that, don't we need to change the language so it says the board or a hearing officer designated by the board? So we certainly can, we can do that.
All right, so this is going on to page 13, there's a bunch of them.
Correct. And that's precisely why I asked the question, because it was just sort of changing language after language after language. But whatever the board is comfortable with, we can include, that's absolutely fine. So, do you want the Board of Education removed completely, or would you want the board or a designated hearing officer by the board? So
I think, personally, I would say I would be comfortable with it saying the board or designated hearing officer. I don't know what other people feel.
I agree.
I might suggest a board or a designee.
Designee, that would work too.
Well, it would really, I think you need to be a little more explicit. For example, I can't be the person to decide on whether a student, I can recommend an expulsion, but I don't make that decision. That would be a hearing officer or full board committee. And that's, again, stipulated under the law.
I mean, if a parent were to take this and read it, and they were to get to, those sections, they're not going to understand that fine point, and they may think, well, the Board of Education is going to make this decision, so I'm going to start calling board members about this, that type of thing. So I think having the dual stipulation.
So we'll do that. We'll put that in, or hearing officer appointed by the board. We'll add that in anywhere it says the board.
Okay, thank you. And, I'm sorry, Mrs. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question. Some pieces of the policy have an effective date of 8/15/17. And
Correct.
everything else we've done has been immediate, so is there a reason for that?
Because there are new laws that have come through, but they don't go into effect until August of 2017. Thank you for pointing that out. So that's why you have, you might be saying, well, if it's new language in red, why is there crossed out language? Because quite frankly, that crossed out language is in place until August. And then you see the yellow, which is new language that doesn't take effect until August as well. So I know it's a bit confusing, but it's either that or bring it back in August and say, here's the new language now, and this has to be changed again. This was how we received this from, from CAVE, and as I said, when we turned it over to the attorneys and had the attorneys review it, and I asked the same questions. In fact, I made sure, am I clear that the language that's being crossed out is in effect until August? That's correct, Betty, and then that would be removed. So we can go ahead and remove that in August, but we don't have to come back to you because it's in here.
So is that how if we when we vote on this, is this how it would go in like this
into
the policy book, and then in August it would be changed?
That's right.
Okay. Sorry.
Mr. Whiskeyman?
In terms of hearings, I mean, there's always appeal process of some kind. Where would they end up if they decide that the hearing officer, they want to appeal the hearing officer's decision? Is it the hearing officer's decision final, or is there a possibility of hearings which could involve the board, or would it go to the courts, or how would that process?
The hearing officer's decision is final, any more than if the board heard the expulsion, it's final. And the law used to be, that's it. Now the law has changed, what was it, 3 years ago? No, maybe 5 years ago, where a student has the right, a student who's been expelled has the right to appeal. Appeal may be the wrong word. They have the right to request to be reinstated. So, that someone just made reference to the fact that a student could come back in, that, the time of the expulsion could be modified.
That's page 9.
The way that that's modified is a student would make a formal request to me saying, I'd like to be reinstated earlier than what my expulsion. I should be out until, May, and I'd like to ask, could I make a case for coming back in at the start of the quarter, for example, and build a case. And then the way, it has not happened often here, but the way I've handled it is I've pulled in Jeff Burt, who handles the expulsion. I pulled in Jim Riccitelli, so it was like a panel of 3. Student came in, made his or her case, et cetera, was questioned by us, asked to leave, and then, we discussed it and then granted a decision. That's a right now of a student to be able to do that. That used to not be the case. Once they were expelled, it was for the full, whatever was deemed the period to be.
Any other questions? Mr. DeBrego?
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you, I just wanted to ask Dr. Fiza. Dr. Fiza, I'm looking at number 10 on page 20, deadly weapon, and that's pretty much out of the penal law, or the New York penal law, which I'm familiar with. I'm not familiar with the Connecticut penal law, but every year the legislature updates and increases weapons, and I was wondering, see where it says vehicle, and then see number 15 where it says dangerous instrument? Now, if I have a box cutter and it's laying here, it's just a box cutter.
Excuse me, could you give us the page number again?
I'm sorry, page 3 of
3
20?
of 20 of the policy itself, or page 26 of the whole packet.
Now, if I have a box cutter and it's laying here, I'm not getting charged with anything. But if I take it and I try to slash somebody with it, it becomes a dangerous instrument. Same thing with a motor vehicle. If I'm with a bunch of seniors at the high school, and I'm driving by, there's no big deal. But if I try to run one of them over, it becomes a dangerous instrument. I can get charged with possession of a dangerous instrument. Now, in one of my reading classes, I had a student take out a butterfly knife, not in Milford. and I had to chase that student and make an arrest because I was a police officer at the same time, and the person was 16. Again, this is in New York State. But butterfly knife or nunchucks, or as we call them, chuck-a-sticks, are not on here. Is this deadly weapon supposed to be verbatim with the Connecticut law of deadly weapon? Like, could Mr. Riccitelli ask Mr. Nielsen if that is up to date, or should we add more instruments that are dangerous, such as a chuck-a-stick or anything the legislator had passed? Because this appears to be the same as it was last time we approved this. I'm just wondering if there's anything updated in Connecticut.
This is updated.
Oh, it is?
From what we've been told, but we can ask that question.
Okay.
13,
All
martial
right.
arts weapons.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, there it is, 13.
All right.
I'm glad to know how to pronounce that.
I just didn't see butterfly knife, and that's what I was concerned with. Or cane knife also is in New York State, is a danger, is considered to have a cane knife, you know, a cane with a knife on it that flips out, or a butterfly knife that opens like this. They're also deadly weapons, but that's in New York. I was just wondering.
My umbrella has a
15.
pointy stick.
Yeah, it's in under 15.
Okay.
Because you have utility knife, box cutter.
Yeah, but that's dangerous instrument.
That's dangerous instrument, not deadly
They
weapon.
move to deadly weapon.
You know, why don't you let me ask Jeff Nielsen?
Yeah, that's what.
A former police officer. So you want to know about the butterfly?
Yeah, the butterfly.
Butterfly
That
knife.
classified.
Okay.
Thank you. Or a cane knife.
Yeah, the seniors at the senior center have deadly canes.
Any other questions on this? Okay.
Next policy is on video surveillance. This has to do with the cameras that we have in our schools. I just want to clarify this. This is not videotaping students, et cetera. That was in the policy in the 1000s, if you remember. So this has to do with the Board of Ed, having the right to have cameras in its school and to do surveillance, but at the same time, we need to recognize student privacy rights. So that's what this policy has to do with. I actually took a piece of the language from your policy in the 1000s to make sure that it was in sync. And then also, I had Jeff Nielsen review this to make sure it was accurate with respect to us. And the administrative regulation is much, much more specific. It gives, it provides information to parents if they if they want to request to see a video, which we get that kind of a request. We have the right to deny that. It's our decision. But and then there's also stipulates the time that how long before we would give it to them, et cetera. So that's a lot of the information is just that kind of piece. Also the storage, how long do we keep it, et cetera. And the piece on records is all in the administrative regulation.
Any questions? Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one kind of a question, kind of a concern, and I don't think there's anything more that can be done in the policy, but I just wanted to put this out there because I think we live in an age of YouTube, social media, and my concern would be that someday, a video of someone committing an act of vandalism could end up in the wrong hands. And if that person were, I'm just going to use an extreme example, that person were to run for office someday and this video of them committing vandalism, somehow surfaces, I just want to make sure that with this policy we're protected against things like that.
And it's a good question.
Okay.
Remember, if a video becomes a part of a student's record, there's state and federal regulations as to what remains as part of a student's permanent file. Discipline records are not part of a student's permanent file.
Okay.
At all. So the one exception to that is if someone, even as students who are expelled, that's not part of the permanent record, except for if they were expelled for the use of a deadly weapon. I believe that's what the language is. So it's very explicit. So anything in terms of discipline, I mean, it's an internal thing with kids as they move up through the system. If they leave the system, nothing leaves the district. It doesn't go with them to the next district. Their grades go with them, their health records, nothing in terms of discipline.
Okay. So would it then be destroyed if they, upon graduation date?
Correct, that's
most
right. It would be-
likely?
Right. And again, it would be the exception that we would have a video actually be a part of a student's record. You know, it may be tied to a student who's expelled or a student who was assaulted. I mean, you know, but it would really be the exception. And in here, it talks about, you know, how long, any videotape that we have, how long do we have it? I mean, you know, the ones that are, the cameras are going all the time. I believe it's 30 days. Video will be stored for a minimum of 30 calendar days after initial recording. And then if there's no reason for continued storage, they just get erased.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so, you say there's not, it's rare now, but it could be something that could be more, happen more frequently in the future, right? I mean, the amount of videotaping that goes on and that is out there could
But this is our
could increase.
videotaping, we're not talking about other people's
Right,
videotaping.
right.
This is, you know, so you walk into any school, you know, there's cameras in the corridors. It's that videotape.
Right.
And, you know, you've dealt with it. I mean, it's just so rare that it's rare that we even use it in, for example, an expulsion case. Or, you know, sometimes, and again, very infrequently, we have parents who may say, I'd like to see the videotape. The thing we always have to be concerned about is student privacy rights. In other words, the other kids who are in
the shop.
in the video. And will this at all implicate them in any way, or, you know, could it possibly result in repercussions on the part of the other students? So we're very, very careful about making a decision as to whether or not to have the videotape be seen by parents.
Okay.
Does the parent have a right to ask for a copy of it?
I believe they can, yes, that they can. There's a piece in here under the AR that speaks about parents. Request to view the video, it has to be in writing. They'll be made available for viewing within 5 school days. So that they would come in and see the video. They wouldn't be given a copy unless an attorney requested it, and then that may be the case.
So it's not as if these videos will be in public hands?
That's correct.
Typically.
That's correct.
Madam Chair?
Yes, I'm sorry.
One exception to that would be if it got turned over to the police, correct? Because then that can go in a permanent record with the police department if it was vandalism or something like that, correct?
It would be in this, the police may keep it for their, whatever charges they may bring against someone, but with respect to us, it's still part of a student's record, and it's going to get destroyed if they leave the district or if they graduate, because discipline is not part of a permanent record.
Oh, no, I'm just was referring to what she said, if later on in life, but if it got turned over to the police because it was vandalism, then it could come up later on that aspect. Because the police would have it in their police records.
Yeah, right,
That's out of our hands. I think, if I'm not mistaken, what you're asking is, are there any safeguards to prevent these videos from getting into the wrong hands?
Correct.
Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yes, correct.
I would say yes, there is.
Okay, and it's just because, you know, paper records are one thing, and videos can take on a life of their own, and it's easy to say that we've destroyed the paper, and I just want to make sure that we have the same efforts in place to destroy
the
video.
I can give you an example. The recent disciplinary records that I've seen refers to an administrator has reviewed a video. There's no actual videotape in the disciplinary record. So we use the eyewitness testimony, if you will, of the administrator viewing the videotapes. We recently had an expulsion hearing, it was the same thing. We did not actually show the video, we just had the administrator reviewed it, give testimony.
Okay, well, that's good to know, but I think the policy is a little forward-thinking, right? The policy gives the ability to put the video somewhere in the student's record.
But that's the law. It can become part of a student record, but again, there's stipulations around that.
Okay.
I mean, if we move to expel a student, and it's because something that no adult witnessed, but it's caught on camera, that's going to be used in an expulsion hearing. That's part of the minutes of the hearing, the documentation of the hearing, et cetera, so that's part of the record, so to speak.
Okay. Okay, makes sense.
Other questions or concerns? Okay.
Okay. Policy is on alcohol use, drugs, and tobacco, including performance-enhancing substances. So again, this is pretty much boilerplate. A lot of the new piece is the breakout of like inhalant use. I'm looking at page 53. Can't see what part of the policy is, but page 53 here, inhalant use, and then you see all of the different kinds of inhalants, you know, the detailed definition of nicotine and all the different forms that nicotine come in, and then also the piece on medical marijuana. So we felt it was important to have all that information in and make it explicit.
Questions? Dr. Gregory?
On that page 53, nitrous oxide, the policy has listed carbon dioxide, which is different and not the same as a whippet. So there are nitrous oxide cartridges, which are whippets, and CO2 cartridges, which are not whippets.
So
I'm saying, I don't know whether the policy is meaning to include carbon dioxide, and if so, it doesn't live on the row with nitrous oxide. It might be a separate row, and you may want the nitrous oxide formula listed there.
Oh, you're saying if they put an N instead of an O, like an NO2?
Right. Well, yeah, nitrous oxide, yeah.
So it should not be on the same line as what I'm hearing you say.
If the intention is to have carbon dioxide cartridges included, like you might have for a seltzer maker or for a pellet gun, then it would be a separate line. If the intention is to describe a whippet differently, then the chemical formula needs to change.
What is a whippet?
We're on television.
Okay. Never mind.
You'll explain that. Quite honestly, you know, again, this is language that's pretty boilerplate, so.
But I know what you're saying, yeah.
The cartridges look the same, but they're not.
They're not, exactly, and I understand both of those, it's two totally different things.
The Cars version.
Any other questions or concerns?
I had one other one.
Yes.
On page 1, under definitions, drugs are defined explicitly. And it says, and non-authorized prescription drugs. And I really appreciate that language. I'm wondering whether that language might also be included in the earlier section where it's discussing how these are being handled. Because I can imagine that a prescription drug would be handled an authorized prescription drug might be handled differently if someone was carrying around the prescription than non.
So I'm not sure where you want it also included?
Well, my concern was in the second paragraph where it says alcohol, tobacco, stimulants, because an EpiPen is a stimulant.
This is Glenn.
Yes.
I may be wrong in this, but I know at least in middle school and elementary school, a prescription, an authorized prescription, you can't carry, the student can't carry it with them. It is in the nurse's office. I don't know if that's the same in the high school.
Yes, it is. All prescription drugs.
What about an inhaler?
Inhalers, no,
It's
there
in-
is.
Those are in the nurse's office as well.
Not if the doctor
Oh, not
gives
in high school?
authorization for the student to self-medicate.
Right.
Some cases, you can't wait 10 minutes to get to the nurse's office. You
But I
need
don't,
to
I
have
think
that.
an EpiPen
My daughter's
EpiPen is different.
works in the nurse's
I'm not
office.
sure about EpiPen.
But that's middle school, so.
Depends, it's age appropriate, you know. So you're asking if non-authorized prescription drugs should be included in this second full paragraph?
Yeah, or something that clarifies that this excludes authorized prescription. I don't know how to word that. But just, I wouldn't want someone holding an inhaler or an EpiPen getting in trouble for holding those.
Right, the only thing that I would say is in the opening paragraph, and that first sentence, the latter part of it, that the school shall take positive action through education, counseling, parental involvement, and medical and police referral in handling incidents in the schools involving possession, sale, and/or use of behavior-affecting substances. So that's what this policy is about. So an EpiPen is, if it was used to change the behavior, could then be considered that. But it's,
But a runner could use an inhaler to enhance their performance.
They
Or
could,
it
and
could
there's-
be prescription.
correct, but there's a whole piece in here on
Yeah, I saw that.
the inhalants. Again, I think that, you know, when we're talking about the policy is around preventing, a using of any kinds of substances, et cetera, to alter kids' mood or behavior. That's really what the policy has to do with. And so, yes, there's no two ways about it. There's kids who are on prescription drugs and they need to be on prescription drugs for whatever their illness is, et cetera. However, if those kids were on prescription drugs and then one of them turned around and shared those prescription drugs with another student, well, then we're talking about something very, very serious.
Great.
So is there a resolution to this? Are you recommending that no change should be made, or?
Well, I was saying that I think that, again, the context of the policy is really important to consider in reading this, because I think we'll always think of, exceptions to it. But if the purpose of this is to make clear to students, to families, alcohol use, drugs, tobacco, et cetera, performance cannot be used for this purpose, is basically what it's saying.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only part that makes me nervous is that it's about possessing, and if someone, I'm not gonna, perseverate on it. I just worry about the person holding the inhaler. Because you can get the inhalers that are over the counter. They do change. That was the only thing that had me hinky was I liked the non-authorized prescription drugs there, and I just was looking for that same clarity towards the beginning. I just don't know how to word it, so I don't.
Can you make a suggestion and then we can ask about that?
Maybe some of my colleagues can help me.
I could just say it's the second paragraph where you're concerned. Could we add just a statement at the end, this excludes authorized prescription drugs? Something as simple as that. It doesn't really fit in that sentence because it's quite long.
Well, again, it's context. It could be authorized, but then you do something with them or I overdose on them. I mean, there's, you know, I think what we're trying to do is legislate something that's really a decision process. This is to give guidelines, and then we have to use best judgment. And by trying to define every possible scenario, it becomes, you know, paralyzing. Because we're trying to say, well, what if this, what if this? If an administrator, again, you know, finds a student and they have the EpiPen, but they forgot to bring it to the nurse's office, that's a conversation. If they sold it to their friend, it's a whole nother conversation. But again, it's up to the judgment and the expertise of the folks who interact with students on a daily basis to use these as guidelines to make those decisions. So an element of this is having faith in the people who actually have to enact these policies.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this? All right.
The next policy is police in the schools. And if you remember some of this language, it's similar to the language that was in the 1000s policy. In fact, I made reference, you know, I went back and looked at that. And I also had Jeff Nielsen take a look at the language in this policy.
Mr. Jagodzinski?
Yeah, I'm concerned that we're taking on rather sweeping responsibilities with the first paragraph, where we say we're responsible for students during school hours, which includes protecting each student's constitutional rights, assuring due process in questioning and arrest, protecting students from any form of illegal coercion and physical or emotional harm. I mean, are we training principals in what are due process in questioning and arrest? You know, do the people in the schools really know what illegal coercion is?
Yes. So let me give you an example. Unfortunately, we don't have issues with this, but there are situations in which, for example, a police officer might walk into a building and approach a student and talk with a student about a particular crime that he or she is investigating, never notify the administrator, never let the teacher know, never talk with the parents, etc. So from our perspective, that could be viewed as coercion, and from the point of view is that you have an officer walking into a building, you know, and it's a student it's not an equal person, and the student shouldn't be put in a position where they have to either defend themselves or, you know, they have nobody there to protect them with respect to, you know, whatever is being asked of them. Again, that's not something that happens here in Milford at all, but it certainly could happen. So I think that that's part of the piece around due process. The other thing that principals, all administrators are trained in is what does due process mean? That you cannot, you know, impose a sanction on a student, suspend a student for a situation if we've never permitted the student to be able to respond to the allegation. You know, it's alleged that you did da-da-da-da, you know, it's our understanding you did, and then for the student to be able to have the opportunity to at least respond to that.
Yeah, this is not due process in the school, though. This is due processing, questioning, and arrest. This is due processing with an officer there. I mean, I would think that, you know, I would think that we would want to the best of our ability, do this. But I don't know if we have the, you know, it's our obligation to protect the student in these situations. I mean, this is really, you would need an attorney to protect a student in this situation. I mean, we can do our best, but, you know, my question is, are we taking on too much, are we assuming too much responsibility here?
And I can understand what you're saying, I mean, I really do. And we can certainly ask the attorneys again, but I think this is standard language. I mean, it's
Has this been checked out with the attorney specifically? In the context that I'm talking about it?
I didn't ask that question, but I certainly can. I know I did sit down with Jeff Nielsen and talked with him through the whole policy. And I know the language with respect to contacting parents, always having an administrator present, is the same language that's in your 1000s policy. But we certainly can ask that. I mean, I do hear what you're saying. Quite frankly, this whole piece, as an administrator, if you gave a lot of thought to it, can make you very, very, very uncomfortable. But it happens. You know, we have situations in the schools where, you know, a crime in the form of, it could be vandalism, it could be an assault or whatever takes place, and so the police are involved.
Right.
Or there could be an active criminal case, that's going on in the community, and for whatever reason, the police have to speak with the student at a particular time. Protecting that student is that the police doesn't interview that student alone. That there's always another adult present when that interview takes place.
And I agree with that. You know, it's just that I think that this is a little too sweeping.
So let me ask about that. So
Okay.
that whole first paragraph.
Right.
Mrs. Krasinski?
I just have a question as to the second item, the attempt to be made to notify the student's parents prior to the student being questioned. Are there cases where students are questioned by police without parents being notified or there?
Yes, there are times when we can't get a hold of the parent.
And you can't put off that question?
Sometimes you can't. If you have, particularly in terms of if it's a situation that occurred within the school, and you only have so many hours in a day, and it's like, you know, are you not going to question, and maybe the student was the witness in what took place, and so you're going to let the student, the day end, and, I mean, so, yes, that happens. I would say that it's less than more, because there's a genuine attempt to try every number possible to try and get a hold of the parent.
Any questions on this?
And again, what I would say is that this has never been an issue in my 6 years here in Milford. The Milford Police, we just have an outstanding relationship. And what really helps, quite frankly, in the middle school and the high school, they're the SROs. They have relationships, you know, with faculty, with students, with the administration. They work in sync with one another. Many, many parents know the SROs. It just goes a long way with respect to dealing with this situation, as opposed to an unknown officer sort of coming in. Sometimes that happens if it's something criminal outside the school, but more often than not, it involves the SRO being a part of this.
So,
Federico?
So if I may ask, just to be clear, if there's an SRO in the school, most likely the SRO is doing the interview, and there's a second person there, the principal
Always a second,
or the
always an
principal's
administrator
designee.
that would be there.
Okay.
But and ideally, that the parent would be there. That's the ideal situation.
Any other questions,
If it was a
comments?
major crime, I'm not necessarily going to tell you that the SRO is the one who's doing the interviews.
Sure.
Okay, because then it's moved beyond the school, it's the police.
Okay, then I think we're ready to go on to the last one.
The last one is on search and seizure. This is to replace existing policy because, again, the laws have changed. This is all, this is standard with respect to search and seizure. What I will say to you is, in all honesty, with respect to, for example, searching for students or lockers, et cetera, we have more power than police do in the schools. And I think, Mr. DeGregel, you would understand that in terms of the standard that police are held to as opposed to the standard that we are in terms of searching.
Correct.
So we generally, we would be the ones, for example, if a student had, we think they have drugs on them, we would be the ones that would say, we think, we have reason to believe, which is not enough on the part of the police to be able to do that. We could pull a student and say, well, you empty your pockets, we empty your purse, et cetera, we're able to do that. A police officer isn't necessarily able to do that. They have to have more cause for doing something like that.
Reasonable cause to believe.
So if a student had a locker that smelled like smelly gym socks, you could open it up to check out what's going on, because the student might not have been, you know.
I don't know if we'd open it up because it was smelly, it smelled like, gym socks. But if somebody came along and said to us, so-and-so has marijuana in his locker, we would pull the student down, take them down to the locker and say, we understand that you may have, and ask the person to open up the locker. Whereas that's not enough, presumably, for the police.
Just because somebody made some allocation,
Correct.
Even if I, excuse me, Chair,
Yes, Mr.
even if I
Durego.
went into a high school, I would be allowed, but the principal would have to be with me, to open up if there was a reasonable cause to believe, and a policeman, but the principal would have to be there to open a lock.
So my terrarium in my locker that, where the fish died might be a problem. But other than that, we're okay.
Well, I'm not talking as an SRO, I'm talking about a police officer in the street.
Right.
There's going to be more of a reason for me to come into a school in the first place, the principal, than a terrarium.
It could be homicide.
All right, any other questions on this? Okay.
So these again are all the first reading, and just to reiterate, I'm going to, on the suspension and expulsion policy, consult with the attorneys around the definition of, facsimile, and also we're going to put into the policy hearing officer, wherever there's the board, hearing officer appointed by the board, and then also find out from the attorneys about the butterfly knife not actually being explicitly stated in the policy, as well as a cane knife.
And there was,
Madam Chair,
yes,
I just want to say there's one other item, it's called a ballistic knife. Just press a button and it flies out. I mean, it's a tap back out, ballistic knife. Just to see if it's all up there. I'm just comparing two states, and I just would want to talk about that.
Sure.
and there was one other, where is it now? That one line on, page 9, number 3. That the superintendent, I can't remember what we said, that may modify the period of mandatory expulsion on a case-by-case basis.
And then under alcohol use, we're going to look at the CO2 cartridge. And then for police questioning, the first paragraph, that seems very burdensome on the part of the district.
Okay?
Yes, thank you. So now we're going to move on to the quarterly budget report. Mr. Riccitelli has returned. Thank you for being here for my budget presentation. We know you were doing important business as well.
I was, and just to update the board, I was across the street because the Board of Aldermen is taking up the bond authorizations for the school building projects, and they still have not gotten to the item. They called me over because we were getting close, but they've gotten bogged down on another bonding ordinance. And but anyway, I don't have any reason to believe that it's not going to pass, but they're texting me to let me know. And if we finish here in time, I'll go back over and do what you need to do over there. I know that, we'll go to the quarterly budget report. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Glenn and members of the board. So, as you know, by the board's policy governance, we come to you once a quarter and give you an update on the status of where the budget is. As I tell you all the time, we're watching the budget on a daily basis, weekly basis, and looking where there might be problems and What I can report to you is that we're at the halfway point of the budget this year, and we really are where we should be. We don't see any significant problems with dollar amounts. You'll see a huge deficit in the right line, huge deficit in account 5601, which is special education tuition, but that's typical. It's running higher than we normally have, and so we're watching that closely. It's higher than it normally is, and this is eligible for the State of Connecticut excess cost grant reimbursement. But that's one of the targets, and I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about the state fiscal matters and how that's affecting the city and how we believe it will affect Milford Board of Education. But there has been talk that the excess cost grant could also be caught up in the state's budget crisis. In other words, right now we receive, over a certain threshold, we receive, according to a state formula, approximately 70% reimbursement from the state under excess cost. But that has slowly been going down over the past few years, and that's one of the areas that the state has identified that could also be hit this year. So we're watching that account. Normally we would have very little concern about it because of the reimbursement, but this year, just because of the overall picture and the fact that we're running higher than we normally are at this time of year, we're watching that one closely.
Just as a clarification, there's the educational cost sharing grant, which the city receives, and then there is the special ed ECS, educational cost sharing, which is the reimbursement monies that Mr. Riccicelli is speaking about. And those monies that come into the city, they don't come into us. If we need them, we can draw upon them, and the city has to give us those monies because they're earmarked as for special education. And those are the monies that we're concerned about may very well be reduced, which means then there isn't the money to offset the pieces here.
Yeah, if less money gets reimbursed to the city, we can't ask for that amount back. So we can only ask for what the state gives the city, and we do each year, and it's usually a wash. So in some cases, the city has a slight surplus in that revenue account, and that was the case last year. I believe the city had about a $37,000 surplus in the amount of money, over and above the amount of money that we needed to cover our excess costs in special education. So a little diversion there. In the budget book, there's frequently asked questions on the excess costs and how much money we've gotten back in the past few years and things like that. We can go into greater detail if we need to at some point. But for purposes of the quarterly report, it's not cause for major concern. We're just watching it, and I just want to let you know that. All of the other accounts we've either encumbered what we expect we will spend by the end of the year, or in some cases where it's really, we don't encumber the money until we're actually billed. So you can see the percentages. Most of them, as I said, were fine. So let's talk for a second about the ECS grant, Education Cost Sharing Grant, that Dr. Fieser just referenced. And she put in her Friday update that the state has notified the city that it will be cutting back on revenue in this year's budget, the 16-17 budget. Monies that the city is counting on as a revenue item in its budget in order to balance its budget, the state is pulling back. There's two areas. One is the Education Cost Sharing Grant, ECS, and that's being cut by the state by about $382,000, $382 and change. In addition, they're also rescinding about $330,000 in, I believe it's the LOCIP grant, which is a local capital improvement program grant that the city uses to do roads, do repairs and things like that. So altogether, the city stands to lose around $730,000 in revenue that it was counting on in this 16-17 budget. This is not, it's not unprecedented, it doesn't happen very often, but it has happened in the past. But it's money that you're counting on, and now you can't count on it. So in response to that, Mayor Blake sent a letter to all city department heads asking them to, or not asking them, implementing cost-saving measures that will put the city in a position to be able to end the year with a balanced budget. He's also asked that the Board of Education partner with the city and implement same or similar cost-saving measures. I believe Dr. Pieser tomorrow is going to send a letter to our department heads, our administrators, department heads, and supervisors implementing certain cost-cutting measures or cost-saving measures. One of them will be to curtail overtime. Overtime, sometimes overtime is an emergency basis, snowstorms, there's nothing we can do about it. But any overtime will now need to be approved in writing in advance by me. I don't have the memo. Oh, I do. Yep, we're excluding essential certified staff. And by certified staff, I'm saying that people that work with students, for instance, a classroom teacher, essential certified staff. So excluding essential certified staff, we're going to put a freeze on new hiring, and we're not going to fill vacancies until the end of the year without the written approval of the superintendent. We have the education supplies freeze account, which is account number, it's on your quarterly report, account number 6,000, the freeze account. And what that is the schools in the 6,000s account, the schools get a per pupil expenditure. And this is also explained in the frequently asked questions, and it's one of the things that some of the questions that have been coming in, you've asked questions about. In those 6,000s accounts, the school gets a certain amount of money per pupil. And that's really the only discretionary money that the principal of that school has. The rest of the budget, a huge portion of the budget is set, they have no control over. But they do get to set priorities within limits for their school, and they get a per pupil expenditure. But for years, it's been a practice in Milford to freeze 10% of that money and hold it until we know that we're going to be able to make the year with a balanced budget. It's a safeguard for the rainy day when there may be a problem. And I would contend that this year may be a rainy day, that freeze account not be touched, not be used. Many times we will free that money up when we have a really good picture at come April or May, and we allow the principals to spend the money that they've budgeted for in that 10% of their budget. So this year we're saying that the freeze account is going to stay frozen, and that we could free that money up for purposes of plugging up this budget gap. The last one is that we're going to continue, we've talked about before, and it's in Dr. Pieser's budget letter. We're going to continue to make a concerted effort not to put teachers out for in-service time during the day in an effort to reduce the number of substitutes that are needed. And that should save us some money in this budget too. So we believe that it's important that we partner with the city. There's nothing saying that we have to, but it's $382,000 that the city was counting on, that they won't have it now. It is in the education cost sharing grant, and so we believe that it's important for us to take on that responsibility. As Mayor Blake said, to tap the brakes on spending a little bit, Our measures are a little bit different than what the cities are, but these are the things that we can do. And so we plan on doing that. We know, back to the quarterly report, we know that there are some accounts that are going to be in surplus. Every year, we say that there's some accounts that are going to be in surplus, some accounts that are going to be in deficit, and then we use the monies to balance the budget, and whatever's left over, we come to you at the end of, middle of May or so, and talk about how we could spend money if it was there. There's a couple of accounts that we know we're going to have surpluses in this year, and that is the teacher substitute line. As I said, we made a concerted effort. Mr. Burt, came in and looked at the amount of money that we're using for substitutes and said, there's things that we can do to cut that back, and that's been very successful. So we think we're going to have a little more than $100,000 in the teacher substitute account. We know that we're going to have surplus in transportation for the two reasons, a few reasons. When the board changed the policy to lower the walking distance guidelines, we came to you with a budget figure that was the worst case scenario in case we had to spend that money. And through good work, I give Judy Mesalagides, the transportation coordinator, a tremendous amount of praise, along with Durham. We were able to get those kids, the additional kids, on the buses at a much greater cost than what we had originally estimated. So we're going to have a surplus there. Along the same lines, we had budgeted for 2 VOAG buses, and we've been able to get them onto 1 bus. That's a case, though, and in next year's budget, we're only budgeting one bus. But if 1 or 2 of those kids is outside the walking distance guidelines and we can't accommodate them, we may have to put that second bus on. So we were able to do it this year. I don't know that we'll be able to do it next year, but we're planning that way. And then the transportation non-public, which is account 5108, we're going to have a surplus there, and that is directly due to St. Gabriel's closing. When the board adopted its budget last year, we didn't know yet that St. Gabriel's was closing, and so the budget had money for the St. Gabriel's buses. And obviously this year we don't need to transport them. So we're going to have a significant increase, a significant surplus in transportation. And then, as again I said, the freeze account. So these are some of the areas that at the board's discretion could be used if the board decides to share in the burden of the city's revenue issues. We can talk about that more as the budget year progresses. But those, we're looking at areas where we can save and help the city through the revenue issue, and we think that the state issues are only going to get worse, and we think that they could be exacerbated next year. I think the cuts could be even deeper. So that's where we are at this point, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Jack Kaczynski?
Yep. I'm not positive what our policy is about end-of-year surpluses, but currently we use that for other projects. Does our policy preclude us returning money to the city?
No.
Okay.
Does this mean that the projects that we can do in the schools next year are going to be greatly diminished because we will not have a surplus? Or we'll have very little surplus?
Could be, but it's going to be a decision of the board when we come to you later in the year and say, these are the projects that we can do, or the board may say, we want to return a certain amount of money to the city. There's nothing that by law, there's nothing that says that the board has to give anything back to the city. But it would be a decision on the board's part whether or not you want to share in the burden that the city finds itself in at this point.
Mrs. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I ask, just to clarify, I'm thinking you would come back to us in May approximately?
Yes.
With that specific question. And by then you may have some savings to show for some of the lines you just talked about.
Yep.
So some of those savings could be put towards projects, and some of those savings could be returned to the city. And we would most likely have more information at that time about what the actual number is going to be from the state,
Correct.
right? So.
Yeah, but the state has already put the city on, they're gonna rescind 382,000. OPM Secretary, I think Secretary or Director Barnes, who's the budget chief up in Hartford, in his communication said that if things change, monies could always come back.
Yeah.
But we don't think so.
Mr.
But we
Wiskman?
wait until May to see, just in case.
May, right, yeah.
In relation to this and the budget, ACES also has received its notification. It's going to lose $3 million. And we meet on Thursday to discuss the options, and that's this year. My sense of it is that they will make every effort to hold off impacts on individual districts this year, but they expect to lose $4 million next year. So we can expect some impacts in terms of ACES, which means students going to the magnet schools and to the special education that are serviced by ACES and other ACES services are likely to get hit pretty hard. And in terms of your budget calculations, that you may want to, look at that, I will provide you with, and I'm sure, Dr. Dennehy of ACES, you'll get any information as soon as we know about it as to what they're going to have to do. But no organization could sustain those kind of losses year on year. You just can't stay in business if you're doing that, so they're going to have to do some things. They're already talking about layoffs and cutting services, and that's not such a good thing in that kind of a service industry. So I don't know what we're going to see happen. They may well ask you to find room for students that you place there if it's possible. I don't know. We'll just have to see what they're doing, because there's a lot of things in motion that they were doing, but now I may have to put on hold. So.
There's any number of things that can be affected by this. When any agency is cut in state money, they have to either stop spending or they have to find it in other places. I'm not trying to project, but some of the schools that we pay tuition to, they get state aid. And if their state aid is cut back, that tuition may go up. So we may get hit in other areas that we're not even planning on.
Well, this is the reason I raise this, because in terms of our budget that we're preparing for next year, it's going to be very difficult to try to foresee some of these impacts and still be able to project what we hope to be a balanced budget for next year. So we're going to have to work through that. Perhaps in the workshops we can have some kind of discussions to the extent that we're aware of what these things mean in terms of impacting us.
Okay, we could get back to the quarterly budget report, which is what the agenda item is right now. Did anybody else have a question or comment on the quarterly budget report? Ms. Federico?
Thank you. The special education excess cost grant, approximately how much do we expect that to be?
It all depends on how much we spend.
Okay.
You need to spend, I'm not sure the exact formula the state uses, but.
I believe it's 4/5. So in other words, correct me if I'm wrong, Carol, if a student is placed out of district, for example, and so we would be expected to pay the equivalent of per pupil expenditure, and any amount over that traditionally has been returned. And so it amounts to, up to, I think, 4/5 of the cost of the out-of-district placement. Beyond that, then we're responsible. But
they've only funded it at 70%.
correct.
Yeah.
They've been reducing the amount, the threshold, so to speak. And the last 3 years, it's been reduced, if my memory serves me correctly, the overall amount of special ed ECS monies that comes into each of the communities has been reduced.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You need to find a different acronym for that, because it's confusing. Excess cost sharing, educational cost sharing, right? Any other questions on the quarterly report? Okay.
Next item on the agenda is the Human Resources Report, and to be honest with you, Wendy Capaz is very sorry she couldn't be here. We have had so much sickness, and she's down for the count. So she is not in. So this is pretty common, similar to what you receive every month. There are the job postings, there are personnel recommendations, retirements, resignations, and then stipended appointments as well. So I'll be glad to answer questions, and if I'm not able to, I'll get the answer from Mrs. Capacity to make sure you receive.
So could I just ask, we just heard you say that you weren't going to be hiring non-essential certified staff. So is there anybody on this, any of these positions that would fall into that category that you will be holding off on?
So to be honest with you, we haven't even looked at it.
All righty.
But what we would do, for example, there are certain positions, I'll say, for example, the speech and language pathologist at Harborside has to be replaced. That's a caseload of kids, and that we are not in compliance with the law if we don't provide the services that are already written in the IEP. So that's absolutely for sure. And the same way with the psychologist, which is vacated because did someone leave the district, or is that because of somebody going out on leave? I forget.
Two going out on leave.
Two going out on leave. Once again, those are positions that are absolutely necessary. But, we really have to go back through here and take a look at these to say, okay, how long have they been open? Have we survived up to this point without the position? If we have, do we need to, then we go with it for the remainder of the year, et cetera.
Okay. But something like a coach, you wouldn't leave that, you wouldn't say we're not going to coach, right?
No, because that affects directly the students. It means that we wouldn't be able to run the sport.
I wouldn't think there's a whole lot of positions in our district that would fall under the category that you really couldn't fill them.
Well,
You're right, there's not, but, if there was a custodian, not to pick on the custodian, but if there was a food service worker, we may be able to fill in with temp people rather than fill the position for the rest of the year.
All right, thank you. Any questions on this? Thanks.
The next item is the disbursement report.
The disbursement report is in your package. It's all of the expenditures that, over $1,500 for the month of December, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions on the disbursement report? Ms. Federico?
The $124,000, I'm sorry, PowerPoint Energy LLC, it's in the middle of the first page. Energy Conservation Services, what period does that cover?
Do you have a number?
I'm sorry, it's
I see it.
187136.
Yes. That was, if you recall in the energy report, that was the money that the board set aside for infrastructure improvements.
Okay.
So this is paying the bill from last year for the work that we did during the summer.
Okay, so it's not like an ongoing contractual thing, this is for specific services that we already received?
Correct.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
That's it for our report.
Then we move on to the disbursement consent agenda. Mr. Vice, do you have a motion for the consent agenda?
And motion to approve consent agenda number 1 is the December 12th, 2016 business minutes.
Second.
Any, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We had no new business. Is there any board comment this evening? Mr. DeGrego?
Yeah, Madam Chair, 30 seconds.
Yes.
I didn't get a chance to say this last month, but Dr. Fiza knows I was invited by Mrs. Intellisano to do a fingerprint demonstration for the last meeting at the West Shore Middle School after-school WAVE program. When I walked in, I was greeted by Mrs. Zito, who was happy that I was there. Mr. Cavana and Mr. Hayes both came in the classroom and gave me introductions. What a program. After school on Fridays, everyone does their homework. Half do yoga and half have Mrs. Ellen Telesano. Then, the next period, they switch. And then everybody goes home, but their homework is done. They don't go home to an empty house, as Mrs. Zito explained to us several months ago when she was here. We had such a time with the fingerprint demonstration that that night was their first dance. So when Mrs. Zito came in and she called half a dozen students and said, your parents are here to pick you up early for the dance. You know what they said, Dr. Fiza? And this was the reward for me. I don't want to go. I'm having so much fun with Mr. DeGrego. I don't want to leave till after class. And that was a reward. The parents let him stay, and we fingerprinted and classified each other's fingerprints and had a great time. Thank you for allowing me to go there. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, board members. Oh, and Mrs. Krasinski's daughter, Claire, was one of my students.
She loved it. She was so excited.
Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Vice.
I just want to thank Pam again. She did a great job with the senior bus trip to Jonathan Law. We all had fun. And everybody who went. We had a lot of people go this year. It was good.
We did. It was fun.
Yep.
We had a good time.
Good job. Yeah.
Any other comments? All right, seeing none, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 10 o'clock. Thank you. Thanks, Suzanne, for